Hello, and welcome to Knowing Nature, the podcast all about exploring and engaging with the natural world. I'm your host, Victor. In this podcast, I talk with other environmental educators about their experiences, their practices, and their perspectives on helping people to reconnect with nature. Today, we're talking about all those bits of paper we give out in the hopes that they'll help people to make the most of their visit, or those papers that we hope will help kids to get the most out of learning experiences. These can be in the form of self-guided trails with questions and challenges, worksheets or forms for recording notes, even just blank paper for drawing pictures of plants and animals. But what happens after the activity is done? We all hope that people will take those sheets home with them as memories of their day, but we always have that worry that they'll just end up in the nearest bin, or worse, blowing around our sites. Today, I'm joined by Charlotte, and we're going to be talking about facilitating an art workshop and helping people be proud of their work so that they don't just want to take their work home, but they're proud to take home what they've created as a keepsake from a wonderful experience. Then, at the end of the episode, I'll be sharing a few more ideas for how we can make those bits of paper part of meaningful experiences that people want to remember. Hello, Charlotte. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Victor. Thank you so much for having me back here again.
Before we jump into this topic, would you be able to introduce yourself for us?
Yes, of course. So, hello, listeners. My name is Charlotte, and I am a science educator at the Natural History Museum. And I'm also the digital learning officer at the Museum of Brands. And in addition to that, in the evenings and some weekends, I also do pop-up painting events for usually adults, and they're social painting events really big in America called sip and paint events. And the idea is you might have, a glass of wine and a paintbrush, and you'll recreate a piece from art history in about 2 hours. So I facilitate those workshops as well.
I've been asking a lot of the guests on the show a bit more about themselves. So I wanted to ask, how did you get interested in nature?
Ooh, very interesting. I think for me, it's been a lifelong thing, so I can't give you a defining, interesting moment because I think my parents very much tried to bring us up in nature as much as we could. We kind of live in the suburbs of London, so we'd always do, long country walks and just days spent in parks and the woods and things like that. So I've always just had that affinity with nature. Always had pets, huge dog lover. So I've always been just a complete advocate for like animals and against animal cruelty, and I've been a lifelong vegetarian because of that. My parents did start me on fish for protein reasons, and then I think I had a profound moment in a fish and chip shop when I was maybe 7 or something, feeling a little bit high and mighty, and I made the bold decision, no, mum and dad, I'm not going to eat fish anymore, and that's when I became a vegetarian. So yeah, and then that's continued into my adult life. I'm now a passionate environmentalist as well, and yeah, always seeking kind of plastic free or low waste alternatives to kind of products and everyday items I use.
I think for a lot of people, that's very similar, where they won't maybe have any individual specific moment, but they might have moments that stood out to them. But what I'm curious about is you mentioned having your adults around. When you think of like really positive moments in and around nature when you were younger, are adults or your parents sort of in the picture? Are you tending to be on your own? What's your sense of that?
Ooh, it's a little bit of both. I suppose I do think there is a link with upbringing, whether you are going to have that positive relationship with nature. So parts when I, memories of family days out with my parents and my brother to like Trent Park or any of the kind of green spaces. And they just have that, golden hue to them that I think childhood memories can do. And it's got all the kind of lovely connections to family and love and summer and those kind of Patronus happy memories. So the adults definitely involved with that. But there are also those times when I'm just pootling around in my garden, looking at the plants and insects and feeding ants honey and stuff like that. Also have this vivid memory of digging around in the soil when I was quite young. I can't remember, must 5 to 8. All the years kind of blur together. And yeah, I was, I suppose, doing some kind of archaeology because I was just digging around, and then I came across this strange kind of 70s owl vase or like container that was just dug in the soil. And I was like, oh, wow, look at this amazing find. So, got that element to nature as well. And I went on to study classics and archaeology, weirdly enough. But yeah, so some of them are definitely self led learning experiences, and some are definitely, connected to my parents and other adult figures.
I think that's such a big theme in a lot of these conversations I've been having with other people, that oftentimes these really sort of positive memories of nature, they're not really directed. It's just sort of noodling around in nature. It's often not, oh, I had this one amazing like science lesson experience out in nature.
Yeah, it's got a lot of kind of rose tinted memories for me because it's me and my childhood dog Peggy just hanging around in the garden, and yeah, with my brother. So it's definitely got a lot of nostalgia as well, nature for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you also do these art workshops for adults. How long have you been doing those? Could you tell us a bit more about doing these workshops?
So I started that, oh, it must have been 2017, I think. So I've been doing it for quite a long time and been able to see the lots of different angles to the business, which has been really great because I did a lot of the kind of social media work and work on the website, and saw a bit of an insider view of how to market these kind of things to our target demographic. And then obviously presenting and hosting the events has just been great fun as well. If at a really good event with a really good group, it will just be like you're at a little party and you just happen to be doing a bit of painting with a microphone on your head. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. And you've been doing a few of these over the course of this year as well. Have they been virtual events?
Yeah, so there's been a mixture. They have been mostly virtual, inevitably, this past year. And then they did start doing a few in the kind of summer months when things loosened up in London a little bit last year. But I've been doing loads of the events by Zoom, and it has been the kind of virtual workshop thing that I know we're seeing pop up all over the place. And that's been a very different experience. Generally, I find it's a more muted experience because it becomes a more relaxed atmosphere if you're just in your home pottering away. I suppose it's a bit hard to recreate the woo party thing that I think some of our live events had, but I think maybe that calmness is much more in keeping with what people needed as well.
Have you found that there are benefits to the virtual delivery versus in person? Because it's a different medium, and often we can get a bit down on these virtual
Mm.
stream things. It's not the same as live, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's worse than a live event, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think a lot of people, or the loudest people, will be sort of, oh, I want to go back to normal. I want to, be back in clubs or parties or these big loud environments. But the different kinds of people that this kind of lifestyle, maybe possibly on the more introverted spectrum, might really love this more kind of working from home digital life, and it might really suit their temperament and personality. And you do find these digital sessions, it kind of opens up the accessibility to different kinds of people that might not like these big, sometimes rowdy social environments. So I think it's been a really useful thing for that kind of person. It's also just amazingly convenient for me as a facilitator. The fact that I need only about kind of 15 minutes to just get my paints and my palette and my bits and pieces together, and then I can just start working is amazing. And it has kind of ruined me for live events a little bit now, because the thought of coming back at 12:30 at night on a weekday after an event doesn't feel as appealing as logging on at 6 o'clock and then logging off at 8:30, and then a little bit of TV, and you could actually have some of the evening left to yourself. So convenient for facilitators as well as customers, as I think.
And different, and you mentioned different demographic, and I imagine people are also from a wider geographic area.
Yeah, yeah, great point. We've had I think we've had some kind of parties for people that were England based as well as based in America. So that's quite lovely that they can share a kind of social experience, which is something very new that hasn't been, I don't know, really possible. Of course, Zoom has been going before the lockdown, but these kind of big, virtual transatlantic experiences I think are fairly new, and that's quite lovely that they can all have some kind of shared family time.
Could you talk us through what does one of these in-person pop-up workshops look like?
So, if you're the operational lead, you'll have to go and collect the kit, and that's enough, obviously, canvases and enough paint and napkin, da 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 da, for the whole group. And then take that kit to the venue, which is maybe a bar or a hotel. And then it's the kind of setup stage. So you'd meet the artist at that location, usually about an hour before the start of the event. And then it's all the setup, moving the tables around, getting the tablecloths on, napkins, palettes, paints, canvases, easels, da da da. Get it all set up, ready to go, and then you'll start receiving the guests and get them all sat down in their location. And then it's, you do the whole fun starting event and getting everyone hyped up. Some of the events include drinks as well, so you can get the drink orders in, and then you deliver the session. And that involves a kind of first half of the session, which is generally getting the background down as the artist. You've kind of got to just get the block colors in to prepare your kind of composition almost, because you don't have a pencil stage with these events, so you need to use the paint to block out the different parts of your composition. And then there's a little break. People can go get new drinks and just have a wander around looking at what everyone else created. And then the second half is generally the kind of detail stage. So as the artist, that's going to be when I add the depth with the darker colors and the light with the highlights on top at the end. And that is the general format. Then everyone goes around at the end, looks at everyone's finished pieces, and has that kind of chatty social element before we do a big group photo with everyone holding up their masterpieces before saying goodbye. We really try and avoid the fancy art terms, even as much as proportion and perspective and foreshadowing, all these kind of terms, which everyone's got some kind of familiarity with, but can feel a little bit intimidating for a social art experience. It's not about creating a replica. It's not a photocopying class. It is just about people enjoying the paint. And we happen to be basing it on Van Gogh's Starry Night or Andy Warhol's Marilyn Monroe or whatever it is for that night. It doesn't matter what you create. We encourage people to kind of go off piste as well, but that does mean bits technically get left out, inevitably, because that's not the emphasis.
Yeah. I think we can all have those really perfectionist tendencies, even with young kids, where what you have in your head, you're not able to get it down on the paper. That can become really frustrating.
Yeah, it is for the audience members as well. And the problem is the human form is very unforgiving because we are biologically designed and trained to recognize human faces and human bodies. And that's, obviously an evolutionary thing. It's a social thing that is just hardwired into us. So it's a little bit easier to fudge a tree if you're painting a tree, or, it doesn't really matter what shape a cloud is because they can really be anything.
How do you get people around that little roadblock? So, when we're doing stuff with kids, if we're having them do a drawing of an animal or do a drawing of a plant, they can see the thing in front of them. And if they can't translate it the way they want to on a paper, often they want to scrunch it up and leave it behind. So how do you get adults to get around that and just kind of accept and as you say, be proud of the work that they have produced, given all the limitations in the format?
I think humor is good to diffuse any kind of tensions or self-flagellating that might be going on. So something I'll say when I'm walking around events sometimes is, if I'm feeling a bit of a funny atmosphere from a few of the visitors or customers, is, let me know if anyone needs anything, advice, recommendations, a shoulder to cry on. And then, that will just diffuse the situation a little bit sometimes. You generally get a laugh, and then they'll be like, yeah, to be fair, this isn't that as big a deal as I was possibly feeling like it was. So humor can be important, having that kind of, those communication skills to break down some of the nervousness or anxiety that's happening about someone's piece of work. Another thing I'd use is just encouraging how special uniqueness is and individuality is. Something I emphasize at the end of the session when we're all taking our group photo is have a look around everybody. Look how different and unique everyone's are, and it just really says something about all of your different personalities. And I try and emphasize, this was a blank canvas before you sat down, and now look at what you created. And also just encouraging them not to feel like they have to copy me.
That's something that definitely I've seen in a lot of the work that I do with kids is, if you have an example, the kids will try to replicate exactly that example because they think, oh, this is exactly what I need to do. So yeah, my strategy for that is often my example always needs to be a little bit sloppy or incomplete. I only take them the first few steps, and then the kids need to, carry it on the rest of the way so that they've got the base there, and then after that it's up to them, and it's okay, they can use it as a launching pad to
That's
do
really
whatever.
interesting. Yeah, that's a great idea. I think it's nice for them to have something to aim for at our events as well.
Hmm.
So I know some people strictly time themselves for about 2 hours when they're creating their demonstration painting because they're like, that's the time people have. But I don't know. I like creating as close a replica as I can. So I think I spent a bit more than 2 hours doing my Starry Night, for example. And in my head, I'm like, I think then I don't know if it's closer to the original artwork, then it gives them a closer idea of what they want to aim for, and it kind of has that aspiration to it as well.
So one of the things you mentioned is going around emphasizing the that individuality, but also, as you mentioned just now, like having something aspirational to aim towards, and I find that that's a really delicate balance
Mm,
to hit. Like what you did is great, but also having a specific something to kind of aim for, hitting that balance of what you
mm.
did is great, but also recognizing the ways in which it can be improved.
Yeah, it's so hard. It is, and I find sometimes it's something I hear a lot is I'm like, oh my gosh, I love what you did with the trees there. It's taking great shape. What are you thinking about it? And they'll always say, oh, but it doesn't look anything like yours. Oh, yours is so much better. And I'm sort of like, well, of course it is. I've done this for most of my life. I've been practicing these techniques all these life. Like I've studied art, and it's a skill that I've developed and honed and studied so that I am good at it. People still take that as a reason to think badly about themselves.
I like the question that you asked of this hypothetical person, like, what are you thinking of with that tree? Because
Mm,
that's a really nice way of getting the person to talk about how they feel about their own piece of work. And I think that's something that's really important about helping kids or anyone to really take
mm,
pride in their work. It reinforces that, oh, they're the artist, they have their own thoughts about it. What
yeah,
do you think about it? Are you super proud of it? If you're
yeah,
not so happy with it, getting them to pinpoint like what is it about their work that they don't quite like, because
yeah.
if it's something new to the person that they're doing it for the first time or first few times, you're not used to thinking through what actually is the nature of the problem, and how can I fix it. As you mentioned, you've been through lots of training in art school, so you've got this like list of problem solving mechanisms to work through.
Definitely. I think you touched on an interesting thing there. I know we always refer to our classes and school children as scientists after they've sort of done one of our workshops. And in a similar way, we're always at the end of our events. We say, congratulations to 27 newborn artists who have started their career with us today. And it is that emphasis that what they've created is meaningful and worthwhile, even if it isn't a photocopy replica of Munch's Scream or whatever it is. And I think that's interesting that you mentioned as well about just making them look at their pace. And by doing that, they'll maybe appreciate parts of it, but they might also look at it with that critical eye, which does get kind of developed within a 2 hour session, and be able to think about, actually, I really like this brushstroke I used in the top right hand corner. I'm going to experiment with using that brushstroke and technique all the way through. And you'll see them kind of grow in confidence throughout the session.
So, in these workshops, what proportion of people tend to take their work home with them? Do you get people who leave their work behind?
Yeah, so we do get some people that leave their work behind. We do encourage people to take them away, partly because then it's not up to us to, decide what to do with them, because the cleanup stage can be fairly elongated, especially if they've been really enjoying their paint in a bit of a Jackson Pollock way. But generally speaking, I'd say most of them take them away because they'll generally have that pride in what they've made, and it is a nice memory of a fun night. Some people will leave them. We do get a lot of kind of posting online throughout the event, so then I suppose they've already got a copy somewhere. They don't necessarily need the real thing. Every other event, maybe 1 to 2 people don't take them, and it can be a bit of a slippery slope as well. So if one person decides they're just going to leave it, then and people get the idea, and then you'll find the whole table of four have left it, or the whole group have left it, which is understandable. Like, we get some kind of party groups whose it's their birthday or hen party or something, and I think they've got a booking somewhere else after the event, so they're not sure if a painting would be the best thing to lug around for the rest of the night.
That's funny. Yeah, they've got a really long night ahead of them. They don't want to carry around wet acrylic paint, maybe.
Yeah, we've actually had an amazing story where one of our customers, was getting the tube back, and there's something I've done a lot. You'll just carry it out and about because, it's just the easiest way to carry it, especially if I haven't brought my portfolio. Someone offered to buy a customer's painting that they saw, just them walking around with it, and I think they sold it for like 50 quid or something.
That's a very interesting point, actually, about if you want kids or people or anyone to take stuff away with them, it helps if they can actually take it away right away. If
Mm,
they have to leave it behind to dry, you will
mm.
almost inevitably end up with some proportion of stuff that just never gets picked up because they forget about it, or they're it just puts that little thought in their mind of like, oh, if I put this in my bag, I'm going to get paint all over my bag.
Yeah, good point actually. We get a lot of questions about, do we offer plastic bags and stuff, because that will obviously make
Mm-hmm.
it easier to take home. But we generally don't, and that's a couple of reasons. It's a waste element, and also acrylic paint. It generally, unless you're using really really thick paint, it will only take 2 to 5 minutes to dry to that kind of plastic form.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've been using really blodgy paint, if you're doing all the you know big thick paint techniques with sort of some impressionistic paintings, then it is the risk that you're going to smudge that top layer. So generally it's safer just to hold it by the kind of back wooden frame of the canvas until it's completely dry. But yeah, we do get requests for plastic bags because I think it's that ease of taking something home which can affect people.
Yeah. So definitely something to consider if you're wanting people to take whatever bit of work they produced home with them is how
Mm.
are you expecting them to take it home? That's a
How
good
is it?
point.
Yeah, how's it wrapped up? Is it presented in a way that is pleasing, I suppose? Whether that is a themed bag or a tote bag or something with a nice print on it. I think that makes it a bit more appealing. So the carrying is part of the fun almost.
One of the things that I've been thinking of in thinking about this topic and with work that we have kids or families or schools do is the amount of time that they've invested in something also has an impact on whether they want to take it home or not. For instance, just a painting on a piece of paper, and then people want to leave them behind for it to dry. A lot more people will then leave those paintings behind because it hasn't taken the kid or the family very long to produce that painting. But on the other side, if I've done a very similar workshop, and we've done making flower pot bird feeders, like fat ball bird
Mm.
feeders. And what they've done is I've had kids paint a flower pot to look like a bird, or really anything. But the example ones I've done are often birds, which is kind of funny. So you have this flower pot shaped robin or blue tit
Oh.
or something. Um, and when people spend the time on that, they can spend in painting a piece of paper, they might spend 10-15 minutes on that. But in this other flower pot craft, they can spend half an hour, 45 minutes working on that because they're taking a lot more time and care into it. And with that activity, you get like 99% of people will come back and pick it up. And sometimes if they have forgot it, they'll actually come back days later and be like, I forgot this thing here. Is it still here? If you put more effort into something, you're more likely to want to keep it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think acrylic paint is good for that because you can just layer it up because it dries so quickly. If you've made a mistake, you can essentially just paint over it with white paint and you're back to a blank canvas. It will be a bit, layered and textured looking, but you can work with that. And I think that makes more people want to take them home. But I think we get a lot more paintings left behind if we use watercolors because it's just so much less forgiving. And once you've got a smudge where you don't want a smudge, then that's kind of that. And so there wouldn't be those easy fixes of, oh, that's fine. Do you know what? If you don't like that bit, just cover it in white paint and then go over the top. We wouldn't be able to do that. So I think, yeah, medium is important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Are the errors fixable? If we go back to walking around during the workshop and just kind of encouraging people to take more pride in their work, are there any other kinds of approaches? You mentioned like taking a bit of a humorous approach so that
Mm,
mistakes or things don't match up,
mm,
they're not so big a deal. And
mm.
then you mentioned being supportive of helping people see how they can fix something that they see as an error. Are there any other kind of things that you tend to say to people as you go around?
I think praise and positivity goes a long way as well because the thing is, if you're nose to nose with a canvas, you don't necessarily stand back and look at the whole thing. And with a lot of genres of art, like Impressionism, they're designed to be viewed from afar. Even encouraging people to stand back and have a look at their painting has a kind of, encourages that level of admiration of, oh, I've done this. And also just finding something to compliment, I love those color choices. I think you've done a great job, on that bridge. Oh, I love that you've done your own thing and put a little dog running through the forest. That's really sweet. Just picking up on some of the playful elements in people's paintings or just some of the choices they've made in a complimentary way. And it's not just, lip service because, it's true. Like, I think that's a lovely shade of purple you've got. Anything like that will just be reassuring and comforting to a customer. And yeah, I think humor as well, as if they seem like they're laughing at themselves. You can have a little bit of a tease sometimes as well. So we've had some people that just really respond to that. They're being a bit playful about it. So yeah, you can be a bit playful about it as well. I think it's just reading the customer, what they need. If they're looking a little bit highly strung and nervous and kind of sad, then they might need a bit of a softer tone and maybe encouragement of how to improve bits that they don't like. So yeah, it's just responding to the customer really.
That's so important, is that feedback, and what type of feedback. And
Yeah.
it can be really challenging to figure out, okay, is this someone who's going to respond well to humor, or oh
Mm,
my gosh, if I make a joke about it, is that going to like totally shatter them?
mm,
That can be really difficult. Your points about finding something specific to make feedback on, that's something that's so important because
mm.
it really shows that you're paying attention to the work that they're doing.
Yeah, it's
um,
that personal touch, and just the fact that you're paying attention to it gives it worth, which they might not think is there. It gives it that impression that it's worth looking at. I suppose then it tips over into customer service as well, making someone feel valued and listened to and thought of.
mhm. Yeah. And I think it's also something that can contribute to having them want to take something home as well, is because
Yeah,
if they can see, like, oh, actually, no, the person pointed out, I didn't realize that this thing that I did, it is actually quite good. And I'm actually
yeah,
quite proud that I did that little thing. Then it becomes something where, oh, it's not a perfect reproduction, but you know what? This is my reproduction because
yeah.
that's my stamp on it. I'm really
It's
proud
almost
of this,
better.
this
Because,
one bit.
yeah,
Yeah. Because you could just
definitely.
buy a reproduction, right? But
Well, that's the thing. We're not training photocopiers. It is just meant to be a representation of what they're feeling at the time or what, just happens on that night. And it's true, it's having that element of just praise, which I think goes down very well. I know we've got that kind of cliched stereotype stiff upper lip thing, and that comes out with people not really liking to compliment themselves. I've noticed if you compliment them, they're more likely to then, be like, oh, yeah, actually, I quite like this bit as well. But they'll often do it with the counterpoint of, I prefer this bit to this bit. There's got to be the negative side aspect to it as well. It's not just a
yeah,
straight out, I like this. Find a lot of customers, it is, I like this, but I don't like this. And I think that says a lot about our kind of temperament as a nation.
yeah. I mean, that's something that a lot of kids have where they can get really focused in on, or anyone really can get focused in on the negative bit about it or what they see as a negative bit and then sort of miss out on actually what are all the positives, but also forget going back to like growth mindset and like this bit you might not like, but why don't you like it? And how could you improve that next time? Or actually, is there a way in which you could fix the error in situ, right? So you don't have to do a whole new picture. How can you actually fix this one that you've created? Nice little acronym I've come across recently is the WHOOP model, and that's your wish, your outcome, your obstacles, and then your plan. So what is it that you wish the situation was? So like, I wish this was better. And then you need the outcome so you become a bit more specific. Like, what do I mean by I wish this bit was better? What is it about it that I want to improve? And then the obstacle, what's holding me back? Do I not know how to mix the right kind of color? Do I need help pinning down, is it a problem of size or perspective or proportion? And then coming up with a plan. How are you going to fix it? One of the challenges also with this kind of a thing is keeping dissatisfaction with the product from becoming an interpretation about your ability. You start to see yourself as just, oh, I'm not an art person, or, math isn't my subject, or I'm bad at whatever. Is there anything with your workshops, with how you break down those attitudes?
Again, it's just seeing what trying to have that psychological aspect of what you think they'll respond to, because if they are this kind of, I don't know, slightly surly, disinterested, I've got so many other better things to do with my time type, they possibly won't respond to the, like, positivity and enthusiasm that might kind of annoy them more somehow. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I kind of come in a little bit more gently, and it is just that slightly more subtle enthusiasm or subtle positivity in a way that they're not going to find patronizing or just too much for their current mood or just personality type.
Mm-hmm. And I think being specific is again one of those things, because that's a good point that you mentioned, where like positive feedback can come across as really patronizing. And kids, if they're not happy with something, if you come in, swoop in and be like, oh, that's great, it's,
Yeah,
this is your own piece of work and blah blah blah, but
yeah,
it can sometimes be counterproductive because they think, oh, this guy's just saying that to make me feel better. I know that this is bad. And
yeah,
that's, you need to again gauge like what is the correct level of positivity. And it's okay to not be happy with a piece of work that you do, but again, it's about instilling that growth mindset. Can they see it as a learning opportunity? And then as a facilitator, can you spin it around into like, try these things to fix it? So you give them a way
mm,
out, a way to learn from the mistake and the experience.
yeah, definitely. Some people will respond to that praise, and some people will want constructive criticism and help rather than that.
Yeah. And being specific in your feedback really helps in terms of not seeming like you're being patronizing, because if you are calling out specific details, it shows that you're paying attention to the work, that the effort that they have put into it. So your positive feedback becomes more genuine in a way.
Yeah, exactly. I'd never want it to be fake. I suppose is that artistic integrity or just honesty, any of the above. I don't just want to be like, yeah, gold star, gold star, gold star. Especially with adults, I definitely don't think they respond to that. Picking up on the kind of specific things rather than just blanket, you're amazing, well done. I think is useful with adults and children.
So let's go back to, okay, so now we've convinced them, yes, we want to take this piece of work home with them. What do you do? So with old pieces of work that you've done, do you ever go back and look at them? Like, do you use them for beyond display, which is an important aspect of all of this? But is there anything else that you use those old pieces of work for?
Oh, interesting. I suppose it's a chronicle of your development as an artist. So I've got this whole portfolio with maybe my works since university to about now, and that's useful to have because I exhibit my work as well, and so it's useful to have a big collection of work so you can see these trends, if that's going to make a more interesting collection of work.
Yeah, I think that's something that we, educators and teachers, we do want kids to keep their work so that they can look back and see how far they've come. And
Yeah.
it can be difficult because a lot of us, we don't like to, people don't like to be wrong. Certainly that's true with me. So it can be hard to look back on earlier bits of work and see all the ways in which you did things quote unquote wrong. If you've got that kind of growth mindset, that can become like a, wow, actually, I can see all the errors and mistakes that I've done in the past. And like
Yeah.
that is a huge achievement. So the work, what does that say about the work that you're doing now compared to what you did then? Sometimes also you can spot, I do the same thing every single time. And then you can decide, is that just part of my signature work, or actually is that something I want to work on?
Yeah, definitely. I was obsessed with photorealism as an art genre when I was going through school, and I was like, that's the highest form of art because I was like, quotation marks, that makes you the best if you can do that because it's basically a photo. And so that was something I'd strive for a lot. I did a series of like cakes and donuts, and it was all about having them as realistic as possible. And yeah, it's fairly nice to move away from that. There is that element of, well, you could just take a photo, so I've been enjoying having my art look a bit more like artwork recently in recent years. So you do get that liberation of different, I don't know, your pieces of work reflect different stages of your life and where you are mentally and as a person.
Yeah. And I think one of the ways to develop that perspective in kids is to show them like portfolios of work so that they can see that no, actually, this is, you can see these things. There is a value in keeping at least some of these old works, old bits that you're, at the time, if you think I'm really proud of it, keep it aside. And then, next piece, you think, oh, I'm proud of this, keep that as well. And then, at the end of maybe a school year, you can look back at the work that you've done over the course of that year. Any other final thoughts on encouraging people or kids to be proud of the work they've done and take it home with them?
I suppose it's taking the seriousness out of it. It's something I try and do in life as well because I think I can take things too seriously. I can always be wanting to succeed or wanting to achieve or prove myself or something. Um, so it is just having that sense of fun and not taking life so seriously. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just enjoy it. You had a nice time. Like, well done, you. Go have a silly journey home and speak to strangers about this painting you're carrying around with you. It is just encouraging that fun, I think, is very important.
Yeah, and I think that is something like if the memory associated with whatever the piece of work is really positive, then you will want to keep it as a memory of that event because it was so
Mm.
good. I think a lot of the work that we can ask kids to take home, if we say to them like, "Oh, keep it as a memory of your day," but if they didn't put much effort into it, there's not much to remember, right? There's no meaning or value attached to it.
Yeah, good point. I suppose throughout the session, it's our job, or part of our job, to encourage people to make an effort. And then if they've made enough of an effort, then, as you say, there'll be that attachment level to what they've created a little bit more than if, we're less present throughout the events. Like, if we're always encouraged to step away from our canvases and go and make those contacts with people. And by doing that, you are going to just, yeah, get a better result because it will now, if you've done a good job in terms of kind of customer service and encouragement and teaching and facilitating, that will improve their experience. They'll possibly put a bit more work into their painting and, yeah, be more likely to go home with it at the end of the night.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, Charlotte, today. It's been a great conversation.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Always a pleasure, Victor.
Before the break, I was talking with Charlotte about how we can help people to take pride in their work as one of the strategies for making sure people take those pieces of paper home with them. Here are a few other ideas for how we can encourage people to want to take that stuff home. First off, make it relevant. So people might not immediately jump on wanting to do something, but if they at least buy into why the work that they're doing is important, they understand why they should want to do it. And over time, they will develop that interest in it. An easy way of doing this is to give people choice. So instead of telling a class, write down all the things that a fish needs to survive. That might not be particularly relevant to a class because they might not care about fish. They might not like fish. They don't have a fish tank. They don't have a pond. Why should they care about what a fish needs to survive? A different way of phrasing it could be choose an animal that you want to keep for a while to observe. What would you need to provide so that it can survive? So in this, we've given them an element of choice. They can need to choose a type of animal. So they might not care about fish, but they can pick an animal that they do care about. Maybe they've got a bird feeder up at their school, and so the kids are really interested in birds. They don't have a pond. They don't really care about fish, but they've got a bird feeder. They see birds all the time. They might care about that. So that gives them an element of choice so that it's relevant to them and their interests. Next, we've got this provision of like a scenario. So why do they care about what these animals need to survive? In this example, the scenario is they want to observe this animal for a while. And that means that, they need to keep it happy and comfortable. So they need to know what it needs in order to survive. So there's a reason why they're thinking about the topic. Next thing, the work needs to be meaningful to them. So they need to have some kind of interest in the work that they've done. And here's something that I mentioned in the conversation with Charlotte is the amount of time that you put into producing a piece of work can really have an influence on how much that piece of work means to you. Using this example, if you've had kids just list things that an animal needs to survive, that activity can take 1 or 2 minutes. They've not invested very much in it, might not be very meaningful to them. If, however, you've told them, okay, draw a plan of the habitat that you're going to keep the creature in, this activity takes a lot more time. And so at the end, it can feel a lot more meaningful to them. Another aspect of it being meaningful is that there's something that they can actually do with this potentially. So if you've just got a list of things that an animal needs to survive, when you take it home, really, it's just a list of words. But if you've drawn the plan of a habitat, it's a piece of work that they could display. They could put it up on their fridge. They could frame it, put it up on a wall. Or, if they're really invested and they really like this idea, they've got this drawn plan. They could maybe make that habitat back at home using this plan that they've created. And so they've got this kind of internal reason for why they want to keep it. They think, this drawing, I'm going to take it home. And then I've got a plastic container and I can make this habitat in this container. It's really meaningful to them. There's something that they want to do with this piece of work. There's a reason for them to want to keep it. Last thing to think about is that the work needs to have value. And putting work on display is a really great way of letting someone know that you value the work that they do. So if this is a kid who's drawn a plan of a habitat, you might ask them, what do you want to do with this? How do you want to display this when you bring it home? It lets them know that you value their piece of work. If they know that, you're going to give this piece of work space in the classroom or space in the house so that people can see it and appreciate it. You value the effort that they've put into it. Another approach is the person going to want to actually do something with the work after it? Does it form part of a bigger project? So for instance, in pond dipping sessions, a really common thing to do is keeping a tally of the creatures that their group has caught, because that's something that you can do to estimate water quality. So there's this kind of scientific exercise, but if the tally is only going to be used during that session, keep a tally of your work. We're going to talk about it later on. After we've talked about it in the session, if that's it, that's all they're going to do about it, why should they take it home? Why should they keep it? So this is where you might think slightly longer term. Is that tally going to form part of some bigger project? So are you going to bring it back to school in order to do a graphing exercise? And then taking it even further, is that graphing exercise just going to sit in their workbooks, or actually is it going to be put on display, maybe in the classroom or maybe displayed somewhere in the school? Are they going to write a blog post about it that can go up on a class blog or a school blog? And so that tally of animals from a field trip, it has this life afterwards. So it has value why you should keep it for a while. And then you've got this wonderful end result that not only has made more use of that one piece of paper, so when it is eventually recycled, it's kind of been more useful. It's less of a waste to recycle it. But also the learning experience has been much richer. That one piece of paper suddenly has linked into lots of these other things. So making work relevant and meaningful and have value to the person who's doing the work, not only does it mean that they want to keep their work, and so we as educators and as people who manage sites, we've got less cleanup to do with random bits of paper floating around, but it also is going to provide a richer experience and a longer lasting learning experience, which ultimately is what we want. So that brings us to the end of our discussion of how we can help make sure that people actually want to take home all these bits of paper that we hand out. If you've got any other ideas, things that your organization has tried and has really worked out well, I'd love to hear them. You can send us an email at knowingnaturepodcast@gmail.com. Tweet them to us at KN_podcast. And if for some reason you've forgotten something that we've talked about in the episode today, you can refer to our full show notes, which is available on our website, which is knowingnaturepodcast.wordpress.com. Thanks for listening.